Greetings and welcome to the National Board of Forensic Evaluators webinar recording entitled The Psychology of School Shooters with Dwight Bain, licensed mental health counselor and national trainer for the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. What you're about to see is a recording from a webinar that was broadcasted live and attended by 85 mental health counselors and school counselors across the country on Friday, April 6th, 2018. My name is Aaron Norton, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Board of Forensic Evaluators, or NBFE. I moderated the live webinar event, which was a complimentary service that NBFE provides to all of our members, as well as members of our partnering organizations, such as the American Mental Health Counselors Association and several state and local professional associations, such as the Florida Mental Health Counselors Association, Utah Mental Health Counselors Association, Washington Mental Health Counselors Association, Licensed Professional Counselors Association of Georgia, and the Suncoast Mental Health Counselors Association in the Tampa Bay area of Florida. For those of you who aren't familiar with NBFE, we're a national not-for-profit organization officially endorsed by the American Mental Health Counselors Association that provides quality training and certification in the specialty areas of forensic mental health evaluation for licensed mental health professionals. We maintain 3 specialty credentials, including Certified Forensic Mental Health Evaluator, or CFMHE, Certified Child Custody Evaluator, CCCE, and Certified Forensic Behavioral Analyst, or CFBA. That CFBA credential is particularly important to highlight today. It's a credential that helps prepare mental health professionals to serve as consultants and trainers for law enforcement, first responders, criminal justice agencies, schools, employers, and other community groups with the goal of assisting the community with violence prevention, mitigation, and response from a mental health perspective. The curriculum for that program was developed in partnership with Dr. Gregory Vecchi, former director of the Behavioral Science Unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and includes training on active school and workplace shooters and mental health. If you like what you hear today, you may want to consider additional training to become a CFBA. In addition to education and certification, NBFE also advocates for all appropriately trained licensed mental health professionals to be able to administer and interpret psychological tests, conduct forensic evaluations, and serve as expert witnesses in court. For more information about NBFE, please visit our website at www.nbfe.net. Now, there are some helpful resources that go along with this webinar, including the following booklets. One, there is a booklet entitled The Psychology of School Shooters, a crisis counselor response training developed by Dwight Bain, the presenter. And there's also a booklet entitled Student Crisis Response, Strategies for Parents and Teachers in Screening for Secondary Traumatic Stress After a Community Shooting. And you will see, if you look in the description of the YouTube video, that we provide you with a link that you can use to download those materials. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the presenter, Dwight Bain. Dwight Bain is a licensed mental health counselor and nationally certified counselor in practice since 1984. He's a trusted media resource who's been interviewed on over 500 radio and television stations, as well as quoted in over 100 newspapers and websites, including the New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Atlanta Journal, Orlando Sentinel, Miami Herald, Newsday, FoxBusiness.com, and MSNBC.com. Dwight Bain is one of the most creative communicators in the country. He's a dynamic man with a real sense of the needs of people. That's a quote from John Maxwell, a New York Times best-selling author. Now, we recorded the live webinar event. We had some difficulties at the beginning of the webinar. So what you're about to see is a point in that webinar recording just after Dwight welcomed the audience. Let's listen in.
Did this have to happen? And I want you to know that from my experience, and I've been involved with school shooting crisis management since Columbine, after spending a day with the Columbine, or with a psychologist from Columbine High School. And I believe that you can really go deep into the mind of shooters. And I don't think it has to happen. But as we take a look at this, let me move you forward. When we think about what's going on inside the head of shooters, this is pretty significant. As you'll see, frequently when they post on social media when we see these shooters, of course, there's the Virginia Tech shooter, Adam Lansing. There have been 208 school shootings up until the Parkland shooting. That was 5 weeks ago, but now there have been 2 more. So now we're at 210 school shootings since Columbine High School. 210. I have the list here. It's almost, goodness, it's the size of a small phone book. Every single shooting I keep track of, and every single one I keep details on. And so I know that as we get you into the head of shooters, you'll notice that when they post on social media, notice where they point the guns. You'll see that they point the guns toward their head, the voices in their head. I think that is significant, because when we think about the most recent school shooter, Nicholas Cruz, frequently people around him were terrified. People around him said, this boy is dangerous. And in fact, 43 911 telephone calls were made about Nicholas Cruz. 43. 2 additional phone calls were made to the FBI. So when you start to think about, oh my gosh, what's going on with these shooters? A lot, but remember, until they break a law, there's nothing law enforcement can do. And unfortunately, that's what happened with the Parkland shooter. As we take a look at this, let's kind of move deep into what Time Magazine called the monster next door. And you'll see on the slide a question that Time Magazine actually raised. And Time said, what happened that caused these boys to go from students to be able to go into killers in 14 months? That was the time frame. 14 months was the time frame between when they were just students with some challenges until they became the monster next door. When you start to think through this, you go, what in the world is going on? Something deep is going on. And you'll see in your PDF that Aaron sent to you the quote from the Virginia Tech shooter. I didn't have to do this. You had 100 billion chances and ways to avoid it today. But you decided to spill my blood. Do you hear the rage? Do you hear the resentment? Do you hear all the things bubbling up inside? He said, you forced me into a corner. You gave me only one option. You caused me to do this. So when I think through the idea of what's going on, if I can get you into their heads, it will make sense. Now, I'm sending a note to Aaron about the idea of recording this, because when you get into their minds, as crazy as this sounds, it makes sense to the shooter. Adam Lansing at Sandy Hook Elementary School, 20 kids, 6 adults. And when you get into their minds, you start to realize, wow, there's a lot going on. Now, you'll see on your screen right now, this is a parody. Let me say this up front. This is a parody site. It's called The Onion. And they kind of make fun of things, and it's a satirical site. But you'll see they post this after every single school shooting. The Onion has posted this 210 times. No way to prevent this, says the only nation where this regularly happens. Now, I put that up front because I want you to know we're talking about the psychology, not the politics. I realize that it'd be very easy to say, get rid of the guns, or for other people to say, give teachers the guns. And I want you to know we're not going to talk about either of those. We're going deep into the mind of shooters, because when you can go into the mind of shooters instead of politics, because I'll tell you this, in the last 25 years that I've been working in this industry, I can tell you that it seems to regularly happen. In fact, a school shooting occurs about every 11 days. So every few weeks, there's another one. The most recent one in Baltimore, when I was talking with people from that school, or even today here in Central Florida at a Christian school, a 9mm handgun, 11 rounds of ammunition. But the new motto, it's not in the slide, it's not in the presentation, but I want you to have it. I want you to at your school, at your counseling center, I want you to be deeply committed to one new phrase. You've heard the phrase, see something, say something. You've heard that, and I want you to know, doesn't work. See something, say something, doesn't work. The new motto that we're going with is see something, say something, do something. Did you hear that? See something, say something, do something. That's what we want to build on, because I want to move you from politics into the idea of how can we stop this? You've heard the motto, never again. You've heard the motto, #enough. And I believe that's the case. I believe that Parkland shooting at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, what I refer to as the Valentine's Day Massacre, was the last one where people stopped caring. It was the last one where we start to see nobody, just cares. People kind of go on with their life. And I think since the Parkland school shooting, now we're going to see people saying, I want to get into the mind of shooters. I want this to stop. I want this to be never again. This is the time I want it to turn around. That's what I want. I think that's what you want as well. And when we go back to the never again, as I jump into the next piece of this, in the middle of a school shooting, there isn't time to think about ways to prevent the school shooting. Your only goal is survival. In fact, you'll see that in the PDF study guide. And as we go through, I want you to know I have included a number of different tools because I want you to have the most significant tool possible so that at your school, at your counseling center, you can get into the mind of shooters. But during the shooting itself, I want you to abandon everything and I want you to focus on survival. As I think about this, the FBI, many major cities around the country have a new motto. It's called Run, Hide, Fight. And it's built around the idea of being able to stay alive, to keep you, your students, your staff alive. And when I think about the Run, Hide, Fight, if you'd like to look that up, it's really simple. You can go to YouTube, just type in Run, Hide, Fight, and you will see some pretty significant tools and some significant resources that are going to help you in the middle of a school shooting. So when the shooting is happening, you have one goal and you have one obligation. And the one goal, the one obligation is you have to stay alive. In fact, I want to share with you a story, and it's a tragic story. You'll see on the screen, that's Victoria Soto. And Victoria was a kindergarten teacher at Sandy Hook Elementary School, and that was her passion. That's what she'd gone to college for. That's what she was interested in. That was what she was going to give her life to. Victoria, as you can see, in her middle 20s, loved her kids. Victoria was one of the 26 people killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And she was killed because she was trying to hide her students under desks. She heard the gunshots, and she was trying to hide her kids. She put some in the closet. They did survive. But Victoria didn't move as fast. And Victoria was killed at the scene. An AR-15, which has a bullet about the size of a ballpoint pen, that AR-15 ripped through her body 5 times. She didn't survive. In the middle of the school shooting, and God rest her soul, in the middle of the school shooting, I want you to know, it's about survival. But let me tell you another story. Caitlin DeBellis. Caitlin wrote a book called Choosing Hope. You'll see it on your screen. Caitlin saved 15 children. Caitlin was next door to Victoria. She was in the very next classroom. And so when you look at, well, what was the difference? Young woman in her 20s, she put all 15 into a preschool-sized bathroom that literally was a 4x4 space. She stacked them on top of each other, and she had the foresight to be able to pull a cart full of books in front of the door. You see what happened? She made it look like there was nobody in the room. Adam Lansing went on to the next classroom to kill more students. You'll see in the photograph that Caitlin looks deeply sad, and I'll tell you why. She was fired. She was fired from Sandy Hook Elementary School a few months after the shooting. And you say, why would they fire her? Because Caitlin started to have panic attacks. Caitlin started to go through the normal signs and symptoms of PTSD because she was there in the middle of a crisis. She kept the kids alive by hiding them in a closet. You may have seen her on the Today Show where I first heard her story. And the thing about Caitlin, because she started to have panic, she said, I need armed security at my school. I need to have somebody here to protect us. She said, nothing has really changed. And unfortunately, the school said, listen, you're just going to have to deal with it. And they eventually put her into a situation where they fired her. They fired her with cause. She didn't get severance. She wrote a book about it. She said, I'd rather be alive than to be at a school where I did not feel safe. And maybe some of you, because I know that there's so many people, dozens and dozens of people right now on the webinar. And I want you to know, if you work at a school where you do not feel safe, maybe you might want to pick up Caitlin's book, because she tells the gripping story, not just of rescuing the children, but of trying to make sure it doesn't happen again. And the school board said, you're making too big of a complaint. Yes, there is an administrative side. I get that. But I also want you to know, in the middle of a school shooting, I want you to survive it. Caitlin survived. Victoria didn't, because there's two groups of counselors, two groups of school counselors, two groups of individuals in a school shooting, two groups of teachers, two groups of administrators. There are two kinds of counselors: those who know a school shooting will happen, and I told you it happens at least every 11 days, and then those that live in denial. You'll see here, Sandy Hook Elementary School. It had doors that were locked, but to an assault weapon, those doors are meaningless. One of the things I found when you think about these school shooters, you say, where do they get their ideas? What in the world is going on? Let me put it up in front of the screen right now, and you'll see it. You see, school shooters, there it is, their favorite movie, Natural Born Killers. This is the director's cut. And when you think about school shooters, they study violence. See, some kids study how to get better grades. School shooters, they're watching things like this, which is or movies like The Matrix. I remember immediately after the Columbine shooting, The Matrix, of course, very popular movie. If you're familiar with that film, long black trench coats in one classic scene where they're blowing their way through security coming into a building. And that's exactly how Eric and Dylan, I'll show you a picture from unfortunately, Eric's journal. We have that. And you'll see the picture, long black trench coats, exactly like The Matrix. It's interesting because after the Columbine High School shooting, where Eric and Dylan came in, long black trench coats, guns hidden in the trench coats, sewn in with pockets and holsters to be able to shoot. Hollywood said, we have nothing to do with this. But I want you to know, movies where hundreds of people are murdered, I don't know about you, but I've been a counselor 35 years, and I can tell you that for a certain percentage, and it's small, but a certain percentage of young men are heavily influenced by these type of images. I say young men because 95% of shooters are young men. This week, Tuesday of this week, just days ago, at the YouTube headquarters in California, it used to be that building, beautiful architecture that used to be the headquarters of The Gap, a clothing store here in North America. That shooter, a young woman, went there, highly unusual. A woman went there, shot 3 people, killed herself at the scene as law enforcement came. I believe, and you won't see this in the PDF, you won't see it, but you'll hear me talk about it. If you follow me on social media, you're going to hear me talk a great deal in the days ahead, and I'm so thankful that you logged in so I can give you these tools. You're going to hear a lot about guns, metal detectors, cops on campuses, armed teachers. And I already told you, I don't get involved in politics. I vote, I support certain candidates that I believe in, but I'm not going to talk about politics because I'm going to talk to you about mental health. Mental health, not metal detectors. I want to talk to you about brains, not about who has the bullets. Let's talk about brains, because if you live in denial, you're at risk, your school's at risk. As we dive back into this in your PDF, you're going to see, when we move past denial, a mass murder. Because when I talk about the Birmingham school shooting, that was just a month ago. You might say, Dwight, I don't know anything about the Birmingham school shooting. What are you talking about? Well, it's because there was only 2 people killed. You see, a mass shooting now, and I think it is kind of odd, but I don't make these rules, They don't count school shootings in terms of another school shooting happened. They count school shootings in terms of how many people were killed. And if 4 or more were killed, then it's listed as a mass shooting. What if there's only 3 people killed? Doesn't count. When you start to think about a mass murder, since this happens at least every week to 2 weeks, in your PDF, you're going to see some soft targets. Now, if you've worked around law enforcement, and I've worked around law enforcement for 25 years as a trainer for the Orange County Sheriff's Office, and I can tell you that they'll talk about soft targets. A soft target means nobody fights back, nobody shoots back. You just have a large group of people. A soft target could be a church, it could be a school, a soft target could be a mall. The most common soft target is the workplace. That's what we saw at YouTube this week. So a soft target, nobody's going there to get murdered, nobody's going there to get killed. We know that airports are targets since the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And because of that, you go through metal detectors. We know that courthouses are soft targets, or used to be. So we harden the target to make it harder for shooters to get there. Schools are very soft targets. They're very soft targets for violence. And when you think about this, I've given you a list in your PDF, and it's massive. If you're holding the PDF like I am, it goes on page after page after page after page of shootings. Columbine High School, April 20th. By the way, the most common date for a school shooting, it's this month. The month of April, right now, most common time for school shooters. Why? Hitler's birthday. And so when you start to look at these different school shootings, you'll see, wow, it's right now. That's why I need you to be alert, dialed in. When I give you those warning signs in a few minutes, it may be that you'll think about certain clients that you have. If you're a school guidance counselor, I have found working with schools here in Orange County, Florida, where I live, and I was on an advisory board for the school board, working with parents, teachers, mental health professionals, allied professionals for many years. And what we found, because our school district is the 9th largest school district in the United States. Now, you say, I didn't think Orlando was that big. It's not, but our schools are, because so many people come to Disney, so many people work in the service sector. In fact, there are 119 languages spoken in the Orange County Public Schools. And so in our schools, there are a disproportionate number of students. And so we're constantly paying attention to warning signs. In the month of April, one of the biggest. As you take a look at this, because it goes on page after page of how many people killed, 2 killed, 1 killed, because I included on the entire list, not just the 4 or more category. And you think 4 or more, because to me, even 1 person being killed is going to have catastrophic consequences on the students who are there. Frontier Junior High School, 3 people were killed. Lyndhurst High School, 4 people killed, 9 wounded. When you look at Northern Illinois University, because I included college as well as high school and elementary school, as well as middle school, 6 killed, 18 wounded. And you say, this just goes on for page after page after page. Dwight, why aren't people talking about this? Well, I think now, since Parkland, I think they are. And I think that you're part of that solution. See something, say something, do something. And part of the do something, I'm going to shift back to the main screen, because part of the do something, look on the screen. Eric and Dylan always said shooting kids at Columbine is easier than trying to fit in at this school. That was from Brooks Brown. He was a classmate of Eric and Dylan. And there's a picture. And you say, where did that picture come from? Because I do have the security footage from Columbine High School, and the pictures don't come out as clearly. These pictures were taken because Eric and Dylan did a project for a film. It's actually a film class where they filmed themselves in those black jackets with squirt guns full of red Kool-Aid. And the interesting thing is they got an A- on the project. A-. You say, well, this is nuts. What in the world was going on? Why were they not paying attention? They were paying attention. They got an A- because the teachers didn't know what to look for. I want to change that for you and I. So when I think about why do they shoot? Look at what USA Today said. Killers don't snap, they plan. And if you're taking notes, I hope you are, because I want you to walk away with a tool. And by the way, everything in the PDF, everything that I have listed, I want you to know as we're going through this, you can share with your school, you can share with administration. I hope that you're able to take this information, share it with your community. Maybe you're on a critical incident stress management team and with law enforcement, firefighters, first responders. I hope you are. If not, some of you may want to get even deeper involved in being able to go into your community to make it safe. All right, so if you're taking notes, killers do not snap, they plan. They acquire weapons, they take a long considered public path toward violence. And you say, where did that picture come from, and why in the world does it say NBC News? Well, remember, Cho killed 2 girls in the girls' dormitory. He then, in his flak jacket, made a video that he sent to NBC News. He walked to the campus with his weapons in a backpack, walked to the campus post office, and at the campus post office was able to mail this information to NBC News. They got it 2 days after the shooting. Of his manifesto, you can look it up on the web if you really want to go deep into what is going on in this boy's mind. He had been harassed, he had been bullied. And listen to me, listen, he had planned for years. And as I study this, what I've seen is that approximately, from everything I found, approximately 2 years before the shooting, it's in their mind. 2 years before they act out in such an incredibly violent way, 2 years before, it's brewing and bubbling in their brain. Now, this is where you come in, because many of these kids, the Virginia Tech shooter, had been in counseling for years. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had been in counseling for years. They've been on psychotropic antidepressant medication for years. And the mental health system, we're going into the mind of these shooters. I just want you to be able to better know what to look for, because there are warning signs. Well, we talked about it. I think it'd be appropriate to dive into it. Because when you think about what is most shocking, of course, the Valentine's Day massacre also happened on a religious holiday. That religious holiday, Lent. The Easter season. This is a picture from the Associated Press, and it's heartbreaking. There's the mom, Ash Wednesday. She'd already been to her religious service. Daughter killed. So when you think about what is most shocking, to me, the most shocking thing is that even with the march in Washington just not even 2 weeks ago, it seems like that people stopped talking about it. To me, the most shocking thing, they have to go to school the next day. Some of these kids were going to take their SAT, and now they're thinking about, am I going to be murdered at school? And remember, Marjorie Stone Douglas High School, just weeks after the massacre, the Valentine's Day massacre, they had 2 other people arrested for carrying weapons on campus. And then a day later, they had the brother, Nicholas Cruz, on campus skateboarding through to see where his brother had massacred people. And you think, well, what in the world's going on? A day after that, the resource officer on campus, and this is right from the Palm Beach newspaper, right here in my hand, the resource officer on campus was asleep in his car. You say, Dwight, why are you bringing this up? I'm bringing it up because I'm shocked. I'm bringing it up because I'm startled by everything that's going on, and I guess I'm startled that other people aren't startled. The television pioneer Steve Allen, they asked him 20 years after he went off the air in this was the late 1980s, and he'd been a pioneer in television. And they said, Steve, what's the most shocking thing to you about modern day television? Because he was back in the black and white era. And he said, the most shocking thing to me is that I'm not shocked anymore. And maybe the most shocking thing for you, or the most shocking thing for me, is that it's just like, oh, well, one more school shooting. Oh, well, one more situation. What are you going to do? Well, I want that to stop. Because when you think about what is most shocking, look at these pictures. These are kids that went to school 8:30 that morning, and it was just another day. Maybe their biggest challenge that day was they had a pimple, or they were going to ask somebody to prom because it was Valentine's Day. Maybe their biggest challenge was, is there somebody that was going to give them a Valentine? Were they going to be in love? By the end of that day, every one of the pictures that you see were murdered. They were massacred at their high school. Is that shocking to you? Look at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, 31 students murdered. What's most shocking to you? Trying to make sense of a massacre, Time magazine said. Teachers, students slain. And remember, there were professors at Virginia Tech who said, I will not teach a class if that boy's in it because he is dangerous to me. That went on for years. Remember, these shooters, it usually develops over about a 2-year period of time. When you think about what's most shocking at Sandy Hook Elementary School, look at all the angels on the hillside. What's most shocking to you? Is it most shocking that Victoria was killed, that Mary was killed, Dawn, that these teachers were killed defending their students? Was it most shocking to you the receptionist was killed? What's most shocking? That somebody would come and kill 5-year-olds? Or is it most shocking that nobody really talks about it anymore? When you think about shocking, Columbine High School. These boys were armed to the teeth. The newspaper said they had shotguns, rifles, 30 homemade bombs. And remember, they had 47 minutes to be able to slaughter. The school went on lockdown, but back then, because of a television show called SWAT that was popular in the 1980s, you always set up a perimeter and you waited until everybody was there on the outside. That took over 40 minutes. And Eric and Dylan were able to go room by room. They had a targeted list of who they were going to kill. What's shocking to you? When you think about what's shocking, I spend a lot of time with the news media trying to explain this. And one of the presentations that Aaron and I have done in the past, you can look it up on the archives with previous webinars, is being able to talk to you about how to talk to the media. Because in your part of the nation, I want you to be the expert. I want you to be the go-to person that the news media turns to. We have a whole training on that. I hope if you haven't taken it, that you will. There's a PDF. Because I'm going to equip you on the warning signs. We're going to look at them right now. What to look for to calm a terrified community down. Now, I know this. The most recent shooting was Baltimore. Listen to me. That was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And because it was 2 weeks ago, I can tell you that we're due. It's school shooting season. And you say, well, that's kind of morbid, Dwight. Why do you say it that way? Well, I say it that way because it's school shooting season and school's open. I don't like that, but I know this. Statistically, there's going to be another shooting. Statistically, it should be in the next few days. Will it be in your school, your zip code? I don't know, but I know this. It'll be in the next week or so, because it always is. The one thing that we know in behavioral psychology is that life follows a pattern. Life follows a very predictable pattern. And shooters follow a predictable pattern. So when I think about why do they shoot, you'll see the image I just put on the screen. Bobby Gladden, this is his Facebook page. Now, if you're the counselor and you take a look at this young man who attended Perry Hall High School, would you be troubled by anything? If you were the counselor, if you were the teacher, I mean, you'll take a look. Murder-suicide at the Manson family, lives in Baltimore, Maryland. He listed himself as divorced because of a breakup. And you say, well, what in the world is going on? Bobby Gladden was 15 years old. Let me tell you about Bobby Gladden. Bobby was 15 years old. He came to school with a shotgun, sawed-off shotgun, an assault shotgun. He had it in a backpack. He fired 21 shotgun blasts. One of the people that he shot had Down syndrome. He was tackled by a faculty member. And in the trial, we got into Bobby's head to be able to find out, why did you do this? He talked about harassment. He talked about being persecuted. He talked about being attacked. When you look at the research from Princeton, Catherine Numa is a researcher there. She said these perpetrators aren't loners, and I think she nailed it. She said these are joiners whose attempts at social integration fail. They let their thinking and even their plans be known, sometimes frequently over long periods of time. As I told you, usually a year to 2 years that they're brewing. Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland shooter, Nicholas Cruz had been posting on YouTube that he was going to be the most famous school shooter. He had a troubled life. When you start to look at the counseling story, because remember, Nicholas Cruz had gone to counseling for several years, community mental health counseling. But then he stopped, and the reason he stopped was because of his mom's health. You see, Nicholas Cruz was adopted. He was adopted, but his dad died 6 years ago. His mom got breast cancer 2 years ago. She died at Thanksgiving, and about a year into her cancer treatment for breast cancer, she ran out of money and stopped taking him to community mental health. $25 a week gave him a safe place to be able to talk. But the thing that pushed him over the edge, his girlfriend broke up with him, just like Bobby Gladden. I don't even have a friend anymore. I don't have anybody that will be there for me. I don't have anybody. So remember, when you open up the mind of the shooter, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but when you get into their mind, you get into their thinking, it makes sense. It makes sense to them. It makes sense to them. And there was a list that was put together. Matter of fact, I put it into the PDF. Because when we start to think about what in the world is going on, you'll see the pictures from the Virginia Tech shooter. You'll see it on the screen right now. Your Mercedes wasn't enough, you brats. If you've ever been to Virginia Tech, you know that it's an upscale school. It's a smart school. I mean, it's a place where really bright kids go. And this is from his video testimony that he made over a period of time. Remember, this was also on his Facebook page. It usually is. This is it. This is where it all ends. End the road. What a life it was. Some life. Do you hear the depression? Do you hear the suicidal ideation? Do you hear the homicidal ideation? It's right there. When you think about, well, how did people miss it? He'd been in counseling for years. I'll give you an illustration because I live here in Florida. And Hurricane Irma, the most recent hurricane that we had hit our peninsula, was just, it's hard to believe, but just months ago. This is an actual photograph from the Weather Channel. Took it off my screen because about every 10 years we have a major hurricane hit the main part of Florida. I live in Orlando, the central part of the state. And this was the model at 160 miles per hour. Major Category 5 hurricane. And they said it's headed toward Atlanta and then on toward Nashville. And if you remember, just a few months ago, Hurricane Irma hit. A friend of mine is a meteorologist at a local television station, and he tells me that this is what you see on your screen right now is called a spaghetti model, because each different scientific group say the storm will go this way, and another scientific group says no, the storm will go that way. It's called a spaghetti model because everybody has their impression. But you'll see that all of the models kind of line up. We're 2 days before it hit Orlando, my hometown, not even a day from when it would hit the Florida Keys, the Metro Miami area. and you'll see the computer models are lining up. You'll see the spaghetti models aren't all over the place, because a meteorologist can tell you during hurricane season, the meteorologist can tell you, this is where I know a storm is going to occur. I don't know the exact date, place, zip code, the hour, but I know the signs. That's what I want you to have. As I said, it's school shooting season. I want you to have the signs. And one of the greatest places to get that, you'll see on the screen, the profile of behavior comes straight from the United States Secret Service. It's their extensive shooter study. And that shooter study, I'll give you the PDF, because there's some primary things, and you can look this up, download it right to your computer, because when you're talking to school administrators, I want you to be able to have some tools in your hand. They may not believe you, but they'll believe the U.S. Secret Service. When you get into the mind of the shooter, it may only be 3 or 4 kids per school. It's usually a boy, 95% chance it's male. The shooter's a male. But I want you to know, when you start to look at the research, look at this. The top findings from the study. Attacks are rarely sudden impulsive acts. In 81% of the cases, other people knew about the attacker's idea, they knew about the attacker's plan. When you look at this, most attackers did not threaten their victims directly prior to the attack, at least not in person. There's no accurate profile of a school shooter in terms of, can I take all of these factors? There are dozens of them. Can I take all of those and say, this is the boy in 9th grade who's going to shoot? The Secret Service says no, but just like the hurricane model, right? Just like the hurricane model, I can tell you high-risk indicators. You'll see the hurricane model, and you'll know somewhere in here is going to have a big storm. And when you start to think about profiling, I'm not picking on kids, but I will tell you that if it's hurricane season, you better be prepared. Most attackers had serious that
Hi, Dwight. We're getting multiple reports of your audio going in and out right now. I'm also experiencing it.
Attacks. There. Aaron, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you right now. Yeah.
Okay. Being able to know that this information is available, and I want you to be able to download it. Now, it's pretty extensive, but when you have the e-file, it's a free PDF. The FBI has one. This is the link for Secret Service. But FBI has one, Secret Service has one, Homeland Security has one, and you'll find as you start to put these together, local law enforcement usually have them as well. In fact, one of the great things I've found is that local law enforcement will come to your school. They'll also come to your counseling practice. It's no charge here in Orange County where I live. And the sheriff's office will come and they'll tell you, they'll do a school safety walkthrough. They'll show you the high-risk indicators. There's no charge for it. And if you haven't done this, I hope you will, particularly if you're involved with soft targets like schools, churches, or you work in an office complex with what might be perceived as higher risk mental health population. And they'll say, these are some things that need to be changed to make this place safer. And one of the things I found when I'm dealing with administrators, when I'm dealing with people in the school system, they may not believe me, and that's fine. But I know this. They'll believe the United States Secret Service. They'll believe what the government says, and I'm going to put some tools in their hands so they can make some better decisions, so they can keep you safe, that they can keep students safe. Look at this drawing that we pulled from Eric Harris's journal. There it is. There's the Matrix style jacket. There's where he kept the guns. His journal goes on for hundreds of pages. And if you're a counselor, I want you to get into the journals of some of your clients. Remember, we're talking about young men almost always Caucasian young men, almost always from working class families up to wealthy families. So, and these are usually good students. They're clever. They may not have the best grades, but they're clever. They usually have above average intelligence, because it takes above average intelligence to be able to figure this stuff out. Eric said, I'm going to kill mankind. I'll get revenge soon enough. One of the things that we know from Eric in his journal, he talked about how he couldn't wait to get to college so he could rape and murder girls. He felt like the girls were the enemy. That's why some of the victims that he targeted at Columbine High School were cheerleaders, the popular girls. And you'll hear a pattern of bitterness and revenge. You'll hear a pattern of hurt, and you'll hear a pattern of, I'm going to get you back. Law enforcement says there are 3 major factors to determine if there's going to be a crime. If you're taking notes, you'll see in your study guide, I've given you the youth high risk factors, and there are a number of them listed. Playing violent video games, certainly on the list, but there are 3. These are the ones I want you to pay attention to: motive, method, and opportunity. Right? If you're taking notes, and by the way, if you're taking notes in the PDF, it's a fill in the blank. I should have mentioned this earlier, but there's an answer key on the back page. I know sometimes I'll talk fast, or because of technical challenges, so you may not hear an answer, but the answer key is on the back page, because I need this PDF to be a tool you can take into your school board meeting, that you can take into where your kids go to school, even, so that you have a resource in your hand. You have every answer. And as I told you, I wrote this. I'm giving it to you as a gift. Please take it, use it in your practice, use it to make your community a safer, better place. Motive is about character. Now, can you spot motive? I think you can. I think you can pay attention to motive. Method is access to weapons. You hear a lot of talk about metal detectors, a lot of talk about assault weapons. You'll hear virtually no talk about mental health, no talk about counseling, although thankfully here in Florida, they allocated $96 million for schools, and $26 million is going to go for mental health programs to identify high risk, at risk students. But a high risk student, we saw this at the London Tower terrorist attack last summer. A person can use a knife. They can use a razor knife. If a person's high risk, they're going to kill people. They may not kill as many. I can remember working at Ground Zero with the team that I partnered with from all over the country of crisis responders. And remember, the terrorists from 9/11 used razor knives. They didn't have guns. They had razor knives. So when we look for a method, access to weapons is what we're focusing on. And then we look for opportunity. Now, this is where hardening a target, making it harder. I worship at a large church here in Orlando. It has multiple entry points. The building seats about 5,000 people. And after the Sutherland Springs church shooting, they took up a special offering because they said we have to have armed, uniformed police officers here in the building. And they said we need an extra $60,000, and they collected that day. And my family absolutely was one of the people that donated, because I don't want to go to a house of worship to be murdered. Don't want my kids to go to school. When my kids were in school, the parents had to pick up the tab to have armed, uniformed, off-duty police officers. Absolutely worth it, you bet. If we can block the opportunity of school shooters, we're going to make our schools safer places. These are the 3 areas I want you to pay attention to. Pay attention to motive. Remember, those are characterological issues, and motives will come up. I'll show you that in a moment. Motives will come up in a counseling session. You're also going to see, beyond motives, you're paying attention to the opportunity. Let me jump into it on the next slide. You see, when you take a look at this, the warning signs, and this first one I'm going to spend some time on because this is the real pattern. Broken expectations. Broken expectations with intense disappointment.
Dwight, I hate to interject, but it is actually a couple minutes after 1 p.m. and the webinar was set for 1 hour. I know we got a late start. We can go into overtime a little bit, and certainly some people may be able to do that with their schedules. But you'll probably want to bring things to a close here pretty quickly.
Good. Expectations create disappointment, frustration, anger, resentment, bitterness, the need for revenge, the need to pay back, right? So you're paying attention to the payback piece. You're paying attention to their use of violent video games. You're paying attention to their family issues. Each of the young men you see on the screen played violent video games. Secret Service says these are the questions to ask. What are their grievances? What do their friends know? Find out. You have a legal right if you're a therapist. Find out exactly what is going on their Facebook page. Find out what they're posting. If there's anything that concerns you, you're able to now guide them away from violence. Ask them about weapons. Ask them about the things going on, because they always have a plan, and eventually they'll talk about the plan. They'll talk about their targets, because shooters follow a pattern of behavior. It is predictable as a hurricane. And when I think about following a pattern of behavior, you're paying attention below the surface. Look at all the things in the PDF you're paying attention to, and specifically the private home life side. And did you see the last thing on the page? They study how to kill. They study how to kill. This is where they spend their time. Part of it is Super Columbine Massacre, first-person shooter. This is a video game you can buy. It's $49 for PlayStation or for the Xbox. And you can practice playing as either Eric or Dylan to see if you're going to kill the cheerleaders, kill the teachers, kill the football players. Who do you want to kill? These shooters, if we can get into their mind, we're able to protect and prevent. All right, so the bottom line, just to wrap it up, there'll always be crisis events like school shootings. Crisis affects every area of life. Community crisis follows a predictable pattern. If I could get to your school, I want you to know, I could tell you, here's what's going to happen. Once you go through enough training, I study at the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, ICISF.org. That's up in Baltimore, Maryland, ICISF.org. Once you know what to look for, you'll see, oh, here's the predictable pattern. But the crisis eventually will shatter a school. Final slide. In a school shooting, you can freeze. That's what most people do. You can be fearful. Oh my gosh, what if this happens to me? You can run or you can fight. And when I think about fighting, I have to tell you, because there are a number of school plans on the other side. But we talked about a school shooting. There he is. Look at Frank Hall. Frank Hall made the cover of Sports Illustrated. Frank Hall was given an Emmy. Frank Hall was a person who was responsible for stopping the school shooter at Charnton High School in Ohio. He stopped TJ Lane, a 15-year-old who shot and killed 3 people in the cafeteria. And Frank Hall said, stop it, because he said that's not going to happen here. He had played college football. You see, he's a big man, and he tackled TJ Lane because he said, stop it. It stops here. And that's what I believe for school shooters. It stops here. It stops now. You're part of that. And I hope that you'll take these tools in the PDF. I apologize for the technical difficulty. I know that's part of the challenge. I wish you were here in Orlando in my study. But I'll post some of the links on social media at Dwight Bain across all social media platforms. I hope you'll stay connected Aaron will take it from here to be able to walk you through. But remember, the PDF has volumes of material, the answer keys on the back page. Aaron?
We are going to be sending a lot of follow-up resources to you all in a follow-up email, including many different links. If you ran into any issues downloading the handouts, all the handouts will be in a follow-up email too, as well as a recording from today's webinar. So we're going to be providing you with a lot of follow-up materials. Now, if you requested CEUs for today, then you'll want to make sure that you complete that evaluation form. We'd like you to complete it whether you want CEUs or not, but that'll pop up on your screen in a few moments, but it'll also come in a follow-up email 1 hour after today's webinar. We really appreciate your patience. We got a late start today because of those technical problems, and thank you for sticking with us through that. And thank you, Dwight, for your flexibility. It's much appreciated, as well as the information you're providing, which is so vital at this point. This webinar had 180 people who registered for it, and we had closed the doors and had a waiting list. This is a very popular and timely and important and necessary topic. And so with less than an hour for a webinar, we really just got a little bit of introductory information, a primer, and you might be asking how you can get some additional information. So we're going to be sending you lots of resources with some additional information. Also, some of you, especially if you're a certified forensic mental health evaluator, you may be interested in pursuing the Certified Forensic Behavioral Analyst, or CFBA, training, because that training was conducted with Dr. Gregory Vecchi, who is a former director of the Behavioral Science Unit of the FBI. And in that training, he prepares you as a mental health professional to be a consultant and an educator, and for law enforcement and schools and employers on violence prevention, mitigation, and response, including school shootings. You'll see that he goes into great depth, providing a more in-depth picture at some of the things that we talked about today. So you can get information on that training by visiting our website, clicking on professional services and then certifications and then CFBA, and we'll include that link in a follow-up email as well. Dwight, and also we have we'll let you guys know that we've already posted our next webinar information, which is entitled What Mental Health Professionals Should Know About Medical Marijuana, a primer for clinical and forensic evaluators. And that one's on Friday, June 15th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That will be a 2-hour webinar running from 3 to 5 p.m. So you should have received an email from that. I think we sent it out actually late last night. So and already a lot of people have registered for it. So stay tuned for that. And that's a free webinar as well for all of you who are members of our partnering associations, or you could pay $10 for a CEU fee if you wanted a CEU certificate. So Dwight, do you have any parting thoughts then for us before we wrap things up for today?
Just I want people to stay connected. There's so many tools and resources that I'll post across social media. Aaron, I know that you'll do the same. There's going to be more school shootings, but my hope is that as we pay attention to mental health instead of metal detectors, that it can stop at your school, your kids will be safe, and you'll be a key part of that because of our time together today.
You guys have got to check out Dwight's social media, by the way, because he posts all kinds of information about the kinds of things that he's talked about today and many, many other topics. So you can get a lot of great information just by following him on social media. Well, Dwight, thank you so much. Everyone else, thank you so much. Thank you for your patience, and we wish you all a happy and meaningful weekend. We'll see you next time.